he's famous for doing. These all are, anyway. So this is the purpose of the thing, what it's designed to do. Remember, all men love to know. What are men peculiarly, and I don't know if he really meant women. Sorry about that. You know, today we say all men, and we mean all of us. But you know, that's changed. You know, what did Thomas Jefferson mean by all men are created equal? He meant, you know, white guys like me. You know, that's pretty clear, right? For Aristotle, probably just, you know, the 500 or so in Athens that he respected. I don't know. I'd have to ask him. It would be interesting. But all men love to know. Their purpose is knowledge, knowing things. That's what makes human beings unique, is that they know things. At least the ones that he's interested in, you know, the one he's trying to describe. So these are the four causes when we talk about them, and everything can be described in terms of these four causes. What is their shape? Tables, you know, pancakes. Didn't bring another pancake today. That was a one-off, you know. Just did that for being silly once, right? And I don't know if anyone else has ever done that. So that's, I think, my one claim to fame, if I ever get any fame. 15 minutes maybe would be enough, right? However, everything has a shape that you could describe, maybe even at multiple levels today. Didn't have microscopes. It was amazing how much he did see when he dissected living animals and things, plants and so on, describing all of those. And by the way, he also had help in describing those things. Remember, Alexander the Great was his student, and Alexander was out gallivanting all over the world with 10,000 Macedonians that were carving up people, although they were using Aristotle's political suggestions, and when they would arrive to fight the enemy, they would send out scouts to tell all the people, we're here to free you from, you know, bondage to this, you know, Cyrus or whoever, right? So join us and help free yourself from this tyrant. And that works pretty well. In fact, once he conquered them, he did give them more freedom than they had, and he tried to treat them like equals and so on, even though his own men got upset about it. One time he was going to a party and he dressed himself all in pink feathers to look like the royalty of the natives, and his men were like pretty put out. That's not really the way we should look. You know, well, we gotta look like, you know, we want to make them comfortable. So, and he encourages men to marry, etc. But while Alexander was out there doing all that, he had roughly 2,000 individuals whose task was to take things he found that were interesting back to his teacher, so his teacher could add it to his catalog of all of the things that there are. So animals, plants, different kinds of plants, different kinds of animals. You can imagine Athens must have been a real zoo, because by then Aristotle had his own school that he called the Lyceum, where he mostly spent time teaching while walking around with his students. So the school was also referred to as the peripatetic school, because everybody was walking around. And somebody mentioned the joke about Plato, right? You know, saying, what is man? And someone said it's a featherless biped. And they say that somebody said that Aristotle was the one that threw the plucked chicken over the wall. I'm pretty sure that's just a joke. But by the way, there are lots of jokes about philosophers. You could look up the deaths of the philosophers. these look like the real ones. They are. These are the real ones. But there are jokes to this. So if you feel like looking up the jokes. Well, I'll just tell you though that they say actually Aristotle probably died drowning, and I think what he was probably doing was trying to get one more specimen, and he ended up drowning, probably with all the jewelry on. You shouldn't go diving with jewelry on, I guess. That's just me guessing. But in any case, the joke is that Aristotle died of I can't remember the joke. He's famous for temperance, right? How do we describe temperance? Not doing too much, not doing too little, right? Apparently Aristotle died of too much temperance. That's not the word. That's funnier when it's, let me see if I can find it. How come I can remember some things right away and other things? No, that's not it. Anybody know that? I'll think of it. I'll put it on the back burner. Yes.
Did Aristotle support Alexander the Great? It seems pretty counterintuitive, the whole evening democracy thing for the
No, he did. Yeah, absolutely, he did. And Athens actually didn't like that.
That's why he left, right?
That's why he left, because Aristotle was there in the heart of Athens, teaching just down the road, really, from the academy. But when Alexander died at roughly 33 years old, much too young, really, well, of course, he was doing really dumb things, like climbing over the wall and jumping into the middle of the enemy and fighting them alone because his men didn't get over the wall. He was alone doing that. He ended up being severely wounded at one point, and so he ended up dying from fever and so on. But once he died, the Athenians kind of revolted against the Macedonians because they were Macedonians. They weren't, Athenians. And so Aristotle quick fled and went, I think, to the Isle of Lesbos, where he had also had a friend, and that's where he met his wife, his friend's daughter, and his family, and so on. So he left, lest Athens sin twice against philosophy, because they had killed Socrates, and he figured he was a famous philosopher, and he didn't want Athens killing another famous philosopher, so he fled. Okay. Sorry if I get distracted. There's just so much stuff to think about. Let's move on, because so this is the fourfold division, but the tenfold division is also very important, and this will be significant. So what are the tenfold division? Everything has substance. That's number one. So you can describe what substance things have in them. And by the way, we're still trying to do that. That's when we use microscopes. We use electron microscopes. We think about quantum particles. You keep going smaller and smaller and smaller to try to figure out, well, what makes all this up? So everything has to have substance, but everything also has relationships with other things. and you can count them. So quantity is one. Everything has to have quantity. This is one table, but this room has 15 tables. 15, right? I do know some math. Sorry, I was kidding the other day. Quality is also important. Everything has quality, and that's a relational thing. So by comparison to other things, everything has a quality. Usually, in his logic, affirmative statements have the quality of being affirmative, and negative statements have the quality of being negative. So one type of quality is affirmative or negative, for example. But you have all of these other things. And these are important because everything can be described, when you're describing it, in terms of these categories and so on. And by the way, these categories will stay with us. Aristotle has 10. When you get to Kant, however, notice you've got the different category systems. Aristotelian realism. I'll click on that. Oh, that's a much better one. I like that much better than the other page. Notice substance, quantity, quality, the relations between it and other things, the place where it is. That's an important part of describing something. Where is Syracuse? New York. No, I meant the one in Syria. No, yeah, whatever. Right? There's a different one. Date. Yesterday, last year, and so on and so forth. Posture. Lying, sitting, sitting on a horse, leaning against the wall. It's both you and the horse are sound asleep and you're resting. I don't know if you've ever seen that image. Paint Your Wagon is the name of the movie. The posture, state, the state of the thing. It has shoes on, has armor on, etc. Action, what is it doing at the moment? Fire's burning. Passion, that one seems definitely to be different than what we mean by passion normally. It's passive. So if it's doing something, that's its action, but if something is happening to it, that's what he means in this case by passion. Okay, so that's cool. So notice the logic fits in. He does talk about all the nature of the language and so on, so you've got that. Describes all of that stuff. Pretty darn complete. So all these different categoria. Where was the other one that we were looking at? I think was it this one? Okay. So, yeah. So notice, by the time you get to Kant, look at the big gap. Kant is publishing in 1780 A.D. So that's A.D. instead of 340 B.C. So that's a long time for Aristotle's philosophy to basically hold sway. And if you think about it, kind of interesting, Aristotle wasn't really liked in Athens, so once Alexander died and he fled, Plato's philosophy really was the one that everybody studied, not Aristotle. Aristotle's books and things got hidden in a basement. Some friend hid his books in a basement. And it was hundreds of years before they were discovered again. But once they were discovered, they were spread towards the Middle East. And so when you get to the so-called Middle Ages, Plato's philosophy was the reigning philosophy. When people were trying to figure out what was the nature of the world, Plato's philosophy was it. But when we get to around the Crusades, so it's both the Crusades, so we're looking at around 1100 AD, right? You have the Crusaders, and the Crusaders are going to intermingle with the scholars in the Middle East, and they're going to discover books and things and bring them back. One of the scholars, for example, meets Moses Maimonides, who was the scholar that supported and was the physician for Saladin, who was the one fighting King Richard III, the Lionheart, and brings books back and starts sharing them. Now remember, these have to be copied by hand at this point, so it's tedious, takes a while, but these books are going to come back, and it's kind of like infiltrating the Middle Ages Europe with